So you're thinking about getting 2 puppies or young dogs at once. What could be cuter, right? Before you double down on puppy love, you must join me to learn about something that many people never hear about until it's too late. And this is something that is commonly referred to as Littermate syndrome. I'm Dr. M. Welcome to VMC. This is something that every person who lives with dogs needs to know about, so join me, you'll learn something today. Before we dive into more about the topic, I do want to first make something incredibly clear. We currently don't have any research that is specifically on this phenomenon of Littermate syndrome. According to the research we currently have, this is not something that actually exists. Now you might say, Dr. M, just because something hasn't been researched doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I'll agree with you, that is possible. I am known to frequently be saying on this channel that we need a lot more research in a lot more areas. What this means though is that when I go to cover the topic in a video like this, that I search for research that would be tangentially related, and we will also look at some of the experiences from veterinary professionals, especially veterinary behaviorists, as they are specialists in animal behavior. But this is also something that other dog professionals commonly discuss, so we will cover the topic using those resources, as currently it's the best we have. So what do people even mean when they say Littermate syndrome? That's a bit difficult to define because this is not a topic that has been confirmed via appropriate, robust, peer-reviewed research papers. We don't have a specific definition for it. However, commonly when you hear this term bandied about, it's usually on social media, what people are often referring to is one or more of the following. There is often a lot of codependence between the dogs, and so they can experience separation distress when they are physically removed from each other. This is a serious issue because it causes the dogs distress. Additionally, it means that these dogs tend not to bond as well with the people that they live with. They tend to look to each other for information. These dogs will also often demonstrate fearful behaviors. It tends to often be in new environments with new people, around new animals, that sort of a thing. These dogs are often going to display reactive behaviors and sometimes fear-aggressive behaviors. These dogs will also sometimes display inter-dog aggression, say with dogs that they don't live with, or even if it's any dog that is not the one that they are very closely bonded to. And it can be more challenging to work with an individual dog from this pair, as they would prefer to work with each other and spend time with each other over the humans. It's also key that people realize dogs do not have to be actual litter mates in order to experience this. This can occur between any pair of dogs. Most commonly, they will be closer in age to each other that live in the same household. And I'm going to bring a personal opinion up here at the front of this video because I don't think that we should even be calling this Littermate syndrome. And I have a few reasons for that. The first reason is that we don't have an actual definition that is standardized from professional to professional, explaining exactly what this is and the criteria that we would expect the dogs to be demonstrating in order to be labeled with having Littermate syndrome. And when you don't have a precise definition, that makes treatment plans a lot more challenging because what one person is meaning can be very different from what another person is meaning. Second, when you call it a syndrome, this makes a lot of people think, oh, this is an official diagnosis and it's quite serious. And I've even had clients say to me, because this is a medical problem, there's obviously nothing that they could have done about it. And that is quite misleading. And so for that reason, I am not a fan. And third, I'll even find that sometimes dog professionals do that exact same thing. They will hear the label Littermate syndrome and they will jump to to the advice of you must automatically rehome one of the dogs. I think that is too simplistic and short-sighted for what is often going on in these situations, and so for that reason, I have hesitation about this label. Even though we don't have specific research on this topic, we should next consider what the most likely contributing factors are. For this, I did go through some articles written by veterinary behaviorists to see what the leading theories from them currently are, while we wait for research to be done specifically on the topic. The current most accepted contributing factors include genetics, and we have to include this for just about everything that exists in the behavioral realm. We know from research studies that both the mother's behavior and the father's behavior do impact the litter. Next, we also have to consider how the litters were raised. Ideally, any person who is raising neonate dogs and getting them through the weaning process before they go to new homes would be using a puppy socialization program such as puppy culture. Unfortunately, that is not always the case, and when young dogs don't have an appropriate environment as they're going through the beginning of their socialization period, that will impact their development for the rest of their life. Third, I don't know that many people recognize that trying to raise two dogs that are similar in age is at least triple the work of raising one. It is an immense amount of work, essentially a full-time job to do it properly. Raising one dog properly is enough work on its own, and frankly, the vast majority of people do not have the time, energy, or resources to properly raise two young dogs at the same time. When you have two dogs that are similar in age, it is so incredibly important that each of them is given alone time. Each individual needs to be taught how to spend time on their own, how to relax on their own, how to sleep, how to use food puzzles and play on their own. Without this dedicated training, we will see these dogs forming a lot of separation, anxiety, and distress behaviors, and that could be when they are separated from people or each other or both. This is, of course, often destructive to the home, but it's also psychologically damaging for the dogs. Next, puppies often aren't all that great at sharing. Often people will fall in love with these cute dogs, but then when they bring them home, they might realize that one is a bit of a bully to the other, or sometimes there might be a runt of the litter that has started developing some resource guarding that they've had to develop because of the previous litter situation that they were in. And when you're trying to raise two dogs, modifying the behaviors of this complex interaction is often quite tricky and challenging and beyond the skill set of many people who are bringing dogs into their homes. Next, we have to remember that every single dog is an individual, and even if they did come from the same litter, they often do not learn at the same pace. They might be motivated by different things, they often have different needs, and they often require different training plans. And people will frequently be trying to work on training time together to be more time efficient, and if they end up proceeding at the pace that the slower dog ends up needing, the faster dog will just go off and start making their own trouble. But if they proceed at the pace of the quicker dog, then the slower dog will often have significant gaps in their understanding of different cues. This creates problems that compound on each other as training progresses and as the dogs age. Another contributing factor is that people will often think that their dogs playing together is a substitute for socialization or training. And this is incredibly misguided and wrong. The people will often also be even more tired than those who are trying to raise a single young dog. And as a result, the dedicated, careful, deliberate socialization that needs to be done for every young dog will get a bit rushed, or it might fall by the wayside, or people just simply will not pay enough attention to making sure it happens. This can be one of the reasons why these dogs end up having reactive or aggressive behaviors around other animals. And this is also why these animals tend to be more fearful in new environments, around new people, or around other animals. It follows that in these situations, these dogs are going to be a lot more likely to form very interdependent relationships. My perception of most of the hyper-bonded dogs that I encounter as my patients is that they are the result of poor socialization practices from their people. And this also explains why the dogs don't necessarily need to be siblings in order to experience this. And it also sheds some light perhaps on why research isn't being done on them. It would be very challenging and unfair to the dogs to try to recreate this in a research setting. The next factor that we need to consider, and when I tend to receive consults, is when these dogs become adolescents. Going through adolescence, which starts around 8 months to a year, is incredibly hard with just one. I remember when my current Labrador was that age. They reach sexual maturity. They also start to go through some behavior maturation, and it always feels to me as if all of the training and work that I've done has just completely fallen apart. Because often this is when the dogs become a bit more independent, they are trying things, testing boundaries, and it's an incredibly challenging time to go through. And patience and consistency and management are absolutely crucial to support your dog as they go through this. And then by the time they're around 18 months, 2 years old, that's when they kind of reach maturity, and you start to find out that all the work you've been doing for the past 2 years was actually worthwhile. But that time frame of adolescence is such a struggle. This struggle is dramatically amplified when you have two dogs that are going through it at the same time. Not only is the management more challenging, not only is meeting their needs a lot more challenging, we also have the additional component that if these dogs are the same sex, so if you have male or female, sometimes these dogs will start to view each other as rivals and no longer as best friends. We'll tend to see a lot of inter-dog fighting start around this time of age. If you have one male and one female dog, then you have a totally different problem on your hands, as these dogs will start to view each other as potential mates. And so they will absolutely breed if the management is not on point and preventing them from doing so. Of course, we must avoid litters coming from sibling dogs. This is a nightmare genetically. Managing more than one intact dog at a time is a lot of work. It's just so much work. And when people get two young dogs joining their household at the same time, they are not thinking for when these dogs reach sexual maturity and what's going to happen at that point. So because of all of these things, the next factor that we must discuss in the development of littermate syndrome is that a lot of times people are simply not appropriately meeting the needs of their dogs. They are forgetting that the dogs are individuals. They don't have the time or the energy or the finances in order to properly meet the needs of two dogs. I also frequently will hear an assumption from clients where they will say things along the lines of, well, I just thought the dogs could keep each other company, or they could help raise each other. That is a misguided notion that is not accurate. That's not how it works with two dogs of the same age or of similar ages. And often clients will say to me things like, well, I didn't think that they needed things like food puzzles and safari style walks and individual training time, because the people say, well, they have each other. But that doesn't mean that their needs are being met, not by a long shot. As you can see, to be quite frank about it, a lot of the reasons that dogs develop these behavioral issues that we collectively call littermate syndrome is not actually because of the dogs themselves. It is a problem with the people and how the people are managing them, and training them, working with them, and meeting their needs. Because the people aren't doing those things well, that's a lot of why we have these dogs that end up with these behavioral concerns. And to be clear, I don't think that people are maliciously trying to do this. I truly think it is a lack of understanding and education on the topic, and that people just don't know what they're signing up for and what they're getting themselves into. It's also crucial to note here that just like with any and all things related to behavior, there are never any guarantees. So I don't want you to hear these things and go, well, if I just give them separate time and train them separately and socialize them separately and do a really good job with that, then it's okay to get 2 dogs that are the same age. And I would counsel you that no, it is not. You can do everything really well and still end up with dogs that are experiencing littermate syndrome. The best way to avoid littermate syndrome is to raise 1 puppy or young dog at a time. And because of this, most ethical, excellent breeders, research-based positive reinforcement trainers, veterinarians, and veterinary behaviorists will all strongly counsel people to only get 1 puppy or young dog at a time. Generally, separating the age of the dogs in your home by a good 2 years is often enough to try to minimize the risk of your dogs developing these behavior challenges. That gives you the time to have the first dog reach behavioral maturity, to figure out, are they even a dog who would want to have another dog join the household or not? And it also gives you time to figure out, do you have the time and energy and the finances to add another pet into your home? Realistically, thinking about and assessing that is important. And so jumping into multiple dogs at a time is a really bad idea because it doesn't give you the opportunity to find out what you can actually do. It is so much better for you, the other people in your household, and for your dogs to prevent problems rather than trying to have to address, repair, and fix them once they've already developed. So please, I implore you, make informed decisions. Raise 1 dog at a time. Make sure you are working closely with a skilled, strictly positive reinforcement trainer, and consult a veterinary behaviorist whenever it's warranted. This will help to set your dogs up for success. We do put up a new video most Fridays. I would love to hear from you with your experiences in the comments section. How do you define littermate syndrome? Please let me know. This is currently a debated topic because we don't have any clear definitions, and I'd love to hear from you. If you have a topic you want me to cover in the future, make sure to comment that down below as well. I'll see you next week. Bye. Young dogs don't have an appropriate environment as they're going through the beginning of their socialization period that will impact their development for the rest of their life.